Joshua is of the tribe of Ephraim, formerly known as Hosea. Moses later renamed him Joshua, meaning Jehovah the Savior. In the Greek version of the Bible, the name Joshua in the book of Joshua is the same name as Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew of the New Testament. Matthew chapter 1, verse 21 says the angel told Joseph that he may give the name Jesus to the son of Mary, for he will save his people from their sins. It was not by chance that Joshua was chosen by God, for Numbers chapter 27, verse 18 says that he was a man in whom is the Spirit. God arranged for him to spend his childhood and youth in Egypt. He experienced living in slavery, but also witnessed the miracles of God in order to save the people of Israel. During the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, Joshua was the capable assistant to Moses. Moses raised his staff while Joshua led the Israeli troops that lacked of battle experiences to defeat the powerful Amalekites. He was the only one who accompanied Moses to Mount Sinai. Later, Moses entered God's cloud alone and received the stone tablets engraved with the 10 Commandments. After setting up the tent of meeting in the wilderness, Joshua was the only person appointed to guard it. Moses sent 12 spies to spy out the land of Canaan. Joshua was one of them. The spies brought back from the land of Canaan some pomegranates and figs. They also cut down a branch with a cluster of grapes in Wadi Eshcol and carried it back on their shoulders to prove that Canaan was indeed a land of milk and honey. However, only Joshua and Caleb firmly believed in God's promises and were not afraid of the Canaanites. They advocated the attack of the land. In the book of Joshua, there is no mention of the author's name. Some Bible scholars view that this book was mainly written by Joshua because certain detailed descriptions can only be first-hand experience of Joshua himself. For example, he alone met the commander of the army of the Lord in the plain of Jericho. Yet Joshua's death and what happened afterwards was impossible written by Joshua. This part of the content was probably supplemented and completed by Aaron's son, the high priest, Eleazar, and Eleazar's son, Phinehas.
Joshua is the 6th book of the Old Testament, belongs to the historical books. It records the history of Joshua leading Israel in the conquest of Canaan. In the Hebrew Bible, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings are the books of the former prophets. The editors of the Hebrew Bible believe that in addition to record the history, the book of Joshua also is God's revelation of faith living through prophets to the Israelites.
Joshua has a total of 24 chapters and can be divided into 4 parts. Part 1, chapters 1 to 5, entering the Promised Land. Part 2, chapters 6 to 12, conquering the Promised Land. Part 3, chapters 13 to 22, allotting the Promised Land. And Part 4, chapters 23 and 24, renewing the covenant with the one true God. The Israelites left Egypt around 1450 BC, and the time of entering the Promised Land was around 1400 BC.
The Israelites, coming down from the plains of Moab, were preparing to enter the land of Canaan. The first city they encountered was Jericho. From the height of the ruins of Jericho City, we overlook the Jordan River Valley. Across from the river is where the Israelites last camped before crossing the river. According to Joshua chapter 2, verse 1, the place Israel camped was called Shittim. Shittim is located within the country of today's Jordan, north of the Dead Sea, on the east bank of the Jordan River.
On the plains of Moab, the Israelites went over Mount Nebo. Coming down from the mountain, Shittim was right below. From here in Shittim to the west is the Jordan River Valley. In the days without haze, one can see Jericho clearly on the other side. According to archaeological research on the site of Shittim, there was no town in Joshua's time. There are 2 hills at the site, and some architectural relics at the foot of the hills, all dated from the Roman time. The name Shittim means grasslands of oak trees. Archaeologists found traces of 4 springs in Shittim and concluded that in Joshua's time there was enough spring water to flourish the trees and grass. Apparently, the Israelites chose to camp here because there was water. Numbers chapter 25 verses 1 to 3 say that when the Israel men arrived in Shittim, they began to have sexual immorality with Moabite women and joined in worshiping the idols. The Lord's anger burned against them. He killed over 20,000 men with the plague.
So when the Israelites prepared to enter Canaan, they should have been camped at Shittim for a while. In Joshua chapter 1, verse 4, God once again made the boundary of the promised land of Canaan clear to Joshua. From the wilderness and the Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea in the west shall be your territory.
It is a repetition with God's promises to Moses in Deuteronomy 11, verse 24. We integrate the description of the boundaries in Numbers chapter 34 and learn that the range of the land of Canaan is probably like this. The wilderness refers to the southern part of modern Israel to the border of the Sinai Peninsula. Lebanon is today's Lebanon. The Great Sea is the Mediterranean. The Great River is today's Euphrates River. All the land of the Hittites probably is some places west of today's central Syria. About the Hittites, the Bible had mentions many times since Genesis. They worshipped a number of gods. They once established the old Hittite kingdom in between the 17th and 15th centuries BC. Its territory includes today's central Turkey to the Euphrates River and south to the northwest of today's Syria. By the time of Joshua, the old Hittite kingdom had been reduced to a small area in the central part of Turkey. For the Hittites have lived in this part of the land of Canaan, the place is habitually called all the land of the Hittites. At that time, many militant nations lived in the land of Canaan.
God knew that Joshua, faced with the strong enemies ahead, would inevitably be intimidated, just as God knows what's in the heart of each one of us. So, several times in Joshua chapter 1, God encouraged Joshua to be brave and courageous. Seemed like God wanted Joshua to remember that when Moses and he crossed the Red Sea, the people sang together that the Lord is their strength. With the strength of God, man can be strong and courageous. However, in chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, God instructs Joshua that the book of the law shall not depart from his mouth and shall be meditated day and night, so that he may be careful to act in accordance with all that is written in it. When he does that, he will make his way prosperous, and then he will be successful.
To prepare for entering Canaan, Joshua first had to collect information about the enemies of the west of the Jordan.
Joshua secretly sent 2 spies into Jericho to investigate the situation of the enemy.
The city of Jericho has a great strategic significance. Located west of the Jordan and north of the Dead Sea, it was an important juncture into the land of Canaan. From Shittim on the east bank of the Jordan, cross over the river, go through the 10-kilometer wide Jericho Plain, and to arrive at the modern town of Jericho. The ruins of the ancient city of Jericho are on the side. Jericho is one of the oldest cities in the world. It was inhabited as early as 8000 BC. The name Jericho means the moon city. It was once probably a Canaanite worship center for the moon god. In Deuteronomy, it is called the city of palm trees. The ruins are in layers with traces of different period of times. We can see that the new city is built above the old city.
This is the northwest of the ancient city of Jericho. There were formerly city walls, both on top of the hill and below.
Look from the east of the ruins, or from the west. The city of Jericho in Joshua's times was built on a hill with an ascended elevation. Archaeologists found, both high and low, 2 layers of the city walls. It was a citadel with an inner and an outer city. The king of Jericho and the nobility probably lived in the inner city, and the ordinary citizens and poor people lived in the outer city. Both the inner and outer city walls were made with mud bricks. The outer city wall was built on slopes consolidated with stones. Both city walls were made of mud bricks of 3 meters thick and 6 to 8 meters high. This photograph shows the archaeologist was standing on the ground where the Israelites marched around the city. The height of the stone slope wall indicates the height of about 3 people. This stone wall that consolidates the slope is 5 to 6 meters high. It's not hard to imagine how worried the Israelites must be when they planned to attack the city and learned about the height of the reinforced wall. Not to mention, the outer city wall was erected on top of it. Furthermore, the spring water inside the city makes it resistible to a long-term siege. Jericho was surely a strong citadel that's easily guarded, but hard to attack.
Chapter 2 records that the 2 men entered Jericho. After spying out the land, they stayed in the house of Rahab, a prostitute. They did so perhaps, on the one hand, strangers often visit brothels and would not draw attention. On the other hand, it may be that Rahab's house was on the city wall of Jericho, so they could easily escape out of the city. When excavating Jericho, archaeologists found that the local people did build houses and live on the city wall. Just like the wall of the old city of Jerusalem, it is also an example of houses built on the city wall. Some sections of the wall are hollow, with partitions inside. Rahab's house might be part of such wall. The king of Jericho sent men to search for the spies. Rahab risked her life and deceived the pursuers, while she hid the 2 spies in advance under the stalks of flax on her roof. Rahab said to the spies that she knows the God of Israel is God in heaven above and on earth below. She planned with the 2 men to save herself and her family in the name of Jehovah.
It is generally believed that Salmon was one of the spies Joshua sent to Jericho. Rahab later married Salmon and rejected all idols. She confessed that Jehovah is her God. Therefore, she and her entire family were saved. Like Ruth, Rahab became a blessed woman. According to the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, Rahab is one of them.
The 2 spies consented to her request. They and Rahab agreed that when the Israelites attacked the city, Rahab would tie a crimson cord in the window. Then she and her entire family would not be killed. So Rahab let the 2 spies down by a rope through the window out of the city and saved them from danger.
The west of the ruins of the ancient city of Jericho was an expanse of mountains. Some tradition indicates that one of them is the Mount of Temptation where the devil tempted Jesus. Thus, the Bible records that Rahab asked the 2 spies to flee to the hills.
The 2 spies returned to Shittim and reported to Joshua, saying that all the people of Jericho were melting in fear and that God's promise would soon be fulfilled.
At Spring of Water International Ministries, we invite you to journey with us, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Isaiah 55:10. To find out more, follow Spring of Water International Ministries.